Ever since the first cold week of autumn rolled in, Ethan had been feeling uneasy in the house. It wasn't the weather or the dim evening light. It was the way his dog, Coda, had suddenly decided the basement was a place to avoid at all costs. Coda used to race down the steps every night, tail wagging, waiting for Ethan to toss the squeaky ball to him. Now he refused even to approach the top stair. He would plant his paws into the carpet and whine, eyes fixed on the dark opening below, as if something waited there that only he could sense. Rena, Ethan's partner, tried to shrug it off, blaming age or nerves, but Ethan knew Coda too well to buy that explanation. Something wasn't right. One night, after they finished dinner, Ethan carried the trash bag toward the basement door. The outdoor bin was accessible through the lower level, so he always went that way. As he reached for the handle, he realized the door was already open a crack. He distinctly remembered shutting it earlier. He hesitated but pushed it open slowly. A faint draft rose up the stairs, carrying the smell of old concrete and something else he couldn't place. Something metallic and stale. Coda stood behind him, hackles lifted, a low growl rumbling from deep in his chest. Maybe a window got cracked open down there. Rena called from the kitchen. Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure she could see him, and stepped down the first stair. The overhead bulb flickered the moment he moved. It had always been touchy, so he brushed it off. But the flicker lasted longer than usual, as though the light was struggling against something unseen in the dark below. The basement was wide and cluttered with old boxes, unused furniture, and metal shelving. Ethan switched on the wall light and listened. At first there was nothing, then a faint tapping behind the far wall. It wasn't random, it was rhythmic, like a slow, deliberate knocking. He swallowed hard. Pipes, he told himself. Pipes cooling after the heat ran. Except the heat hadn't been on. He took another step forward. As he did, he saw something on the floor near the laundry corner. A line of fine dirt trailed across the tiles in a perfect arc, as if something had been dragged. The trail led toward the storage closet in the far back, the one they barely ever opened. Coda let out a sharp bark from upstairs. Ethan called up to him, trying to sound calm, but his voice wavered. He approached the storage closet slowly. The air grew colder the closer he got, and every instinct told him not to open that door. The tapping behind the wall seemed to respond to his movements. Growing quicker like a heartbeat, he reached out and pressed his hand to the closet knob. It was warm, strangely warm. He jerked his hand back. That made no sense. The basement was cold. Everything down here should have been the same temperature. Something shifted behind the door. Not loud, just a scrape of weight shifting on the floor. Ethan froze. There was no mistaking it. Someone or something was inside that closet. He backed away, step by careful step, until he reached the stairs. As he started up, the overhead bulb flickered again. This time, it didn't stop. The light stuttered faster and faster until suddenly it popped and the basement fell into total darkness. Coda barked loudly, claws tapping on the hallway floor. Then Ethan heard something that made his blood run cold. The storage closet door creaked open, slowly, deliberately. He could hear the hinges dragging across old wood. He didn't wait to see anything. He bolted up the stairs, slammed the door behind him, and locked it. Rena rushed in from the living room, startled. What happened? Ethan tried to answer, but his breath shook too hard for words. He leaned against the door, heart rattling like it wanted out of his chest. From the other side of the basement door came a single sound, a breath, drawn in, slow and intentional, as if the thing down there had come right up to the bottom step to listen. Coda whimpered and hid behind Rena. Ethan finally sank to the floor, because he realized something chilling. That warm doorknob wasn't a trick of his imagination. Whatever lived in that storage closet wasn't just hiding. It had been waiting, and now it knew he had found it. Liam never believed in the idea of a house having a memory until he moved into the rental near the edge of town. From the outside, it looked harmless enough. A two-story place with chipped blue paint and a fenced backyard. He and his friend Nora had taken it mainly for the cheap rent, ignoring the landlord's vague warnings about the unfinished areas and the quirky noises the place made at night. Old pipes, the landlord said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Houses like this settle, shift, breathe. Liam didn't like the way he said breathe. The basement was enormous, made of cold gray concrete and lit by a single weak bulb that buzzed every time it flicked on. Nora didn't worry much about it, but Liam hated going down there alone. The floor always felt colder in the middle, as if something underneath was stealing the warmth from the air. Their first night passed quietly enough, but on the second night, Liam woke to an odd sound. Faint footsteps downstairs, not quick or scurrying like an animal, slow, heavy, and strangely careful, as if someone didn't want to be heard but couldn't hide their weight, pressing into each step. He sat up, listening hard. Nora's room was across the hall, and he could hear her steady breathing through the thin walls. Whatever moved downstairs wasn't her. He forced himself to get up and crept to the top of the basement stairs. The light below was off, but the sound came again. A soft thud, a pause, another thud. He held his breath, waiting for a pattern. But the steps stopped abruptly, as if the thing below sensed him standing there. He shut the basement door quietly and locked it. The next morning, he told Nora about it. She laughed it off, calling it his overactive night brain. But he saw the way her eyes drifted toward the basement door as she spoke. That same afternoon, Liam decided to check the basement more thoroughly. Nora was at work, and he preferred doing it alone so she wouldn't worry. He grabbed a flashlight and headed down. The moment he reached the bottom step, the temperature changed. The air turned thick and cool, like a damp underground chamber. He shone the flashlight across the walls. The concrete was chipped in odd places, long scratches running low along the surface, as though someone had dragged something heavy across them for years. He walked toward the back, where an old workbench sat. Scattered across the floor were bits of debris he didn't recognize. Thin strips of wood, small pieces of broken glass, and something that looked like a torn piece of fabric. He knelt to inspect them. The fabric looked fresh, not old, like something forgotten, and it smelled faintly of sweat. Liam stood quickly. He checked the far wall again, this time letting the beam linger on the floor. The concrete line looked uneven. He knelt and touched the edge. The floor felt warm, too warm for a basement in autumn. Beneath the warmth, he felt the vibration, gentle, rhythmic, almost like breathing. His stomach tightened. He stepped back. When Nora came home later, she asked why he looked pale. He told her part of it, leaving out the breathing part so she wouldn't think he had lost it. She listened quietly, then went into the kitchen without responding. When she returned, she handed him a mug of tea. "Don't go down there again tonight," she said. Her voice was firm but soft. "Just wait," Liam agreed, though his mind kept repeating the vibration under the concrete. That night, it escalated. Liam woke to the same footsteps, only louder this time, heavier, closer. He sat up, heart pounding. His bedroom door rattled slightly, as if touched from the outside, though no one knocked. He whispered Nora's name, but there was no answer. He rushed across the hall to her room. She wasn't there. Panic surged through him. He grabbed his phone and used the screen's glow to navigate the dark hallway. When he reached the top of the basement stairs, he froze. The basement light was on. He didn't remember turning it on. Nora wouldn't have gone down there. Something in him begged him to run, to get outside, to call someone, but he stepped forward anyway, pulled by a need to know. He opened the door. The basement was silent. Silent. Liam called out for Nora, but only his echo replied. He took one cautious step down, then another. A soft creak came from the far corner, where the floor had felt warm earlier. Liam swung his light toward it. The concrete slab in the corner wasn't flat anymore. It had lifted slightly, like something underneath was pressing upward, pushing, forcing its way toward the surface. Liam stumbled back, breath tightening in his chest. As he reached the top step again, he heard it, a voice from beneath the concrete. A whisper so faint it almost wasn't a word, but he recognized the sound of it. It was Nora's voice calling his name.
Julian and Maren never planned on inheriting the old farmhouse. It had belonged to Julian's distant uncle, a man he barely remembered and whom Maren had never met. When a lawyer handed them the keys, they exchanged uncertain glances. The house stood alone at the end of a long gravel road, surrounded by wilted fields and a grove of dead trees that leaned toward the house as if listening. They moved in out of curiosity more than necessity. The first week was peaceful enough, though the house felt too quiet at night. The basement, however, was something else entirely. Julian noticed it on the second day when he pulled up an old rug in the corner to clean. Beneath it, he found a set of floorboards that didn't match the rest of the room. They were newer, smoother, and nailed down with thick iron nails that looked hand-forged. Marin insisted they leave it alone, but the uneasiness the boards gave Julian only grew stronger. Every time he passed that corner, he felt as though something waited beneath the wood, silent and patient. One evening, as the sun lowered behind the trees, they heard a faint tapping from the basement. Marin thought it might be a tree branch, but Julian knew better. The rhythm wasn't random. It was steady and spaced apart, 3 taps followed by silence, then 3 more. Marin clenched his arm. "Maybe something fell down there," she whispered. Julian nodded and grabbed a flashlight. The basement air hit them as they walked down the stairs, thick and stale, like a room sealed for too long. The tapping had stopped, but the corner with the mismatched boards seemed darker than the rest, as though the shadows clung to it. Julian approached slowly and knelt beside the boards. He pressed his hand to the wood. It felt warm. Marin stepped back, rubbing her arms. "This place isn't right," she said quietly. "Your uncle must have sealed something down there." Julian didn't answer. He pulled at one of the iron nails. To his surprise, it lifted easily, as if it had been loosened from beneath. He removed another, then another, until the final board slid aside with a heavy groan. Beneath, it was a second door, small, wooden, and bolted shut from the outside. Long scratch marks covered the surface. Marin covered her mouth. "Why would he lock something below the basement?" she whispered. Julian stared at the door, dread creeping up his spine. He reached for the bolt and paused. From behind the door came a faint sound. Not tapping, breathing, long and slow, as though whoever or whatever was on the other side had been waiting for the first sign of light. "Julian," Marin said, voice shaking, "we should call someone." He knew she was right, but he felt drawn to the door, compelled by something that felt older than the house itself. He slid the bolt free. The air shifted instantly, becoming colder. Marin backed toward the stairs. The door swung open by itself, creaking softly. A narrow chamber stretched below, lit only by the beam of Julian's flashlight. The walls were packed dirt, clawed, and uneven. In the center lay a pile of shredded blankets, old food tins, and broken glass jars. At first it looked like a nest, then something moved within it. Julian stopped breathing. A hand appeared, thin, filthy, followed by an arm and a face so pale it almost glowed. A woman crawled forward, her hair hanging in tangled ropes around her shoulders. She blinked at the light as though it hurt. "Help me," she whispered. Julian staggered back. Marin screamed and grabbed his arm, trying to pull him toward the stairs. The woman crawled farther, dragging herself onto the basement floor. Her voice shook. "He kept me down there. He fed me scraps. He said the air outside wasn't for me anymore." Julian stared, horrified. "Who kept you?" he asked. The woman turned her head slowly toward the dark chamber behind her. "The one who still lives down there," she whispered. Marin froze. Julian's flashlight flickered. The woman's expression changed, twisting in fear. She backed away toward them, eyes fixed on the open doorway. Something inside the chamber exhaled. A deep, guttural breath. The dirt walls trembled. Julian grabbed Marin's hand and ran up the stairs as the pale woman scrambled behind them. The light failed completely. A thud shook the basement floor. Then another. Something was climbing out of that chamber. Julian shoved Marin through the basement door and slammed it shut, locking it as hard pounding hit the other side. The pale woman collapsed on the hallway floor, gasping. "You shouldn't have opened it," she whispered. Julian stared at the door, terrified. Below them, something clawed the stairs, dragging itself closer to the surface for the first time in years. And it wasn't going back.